Hi everyone, my name is Noeen and I am basically a research scientist, associate researcher for molecular oncology. And I'm also like a member and a volunteer for SCWIST. And Christine is like director of event and she asked me to moderate this, to be a moderator of this event, and I'm more than happy to do that. So I welcome everyone here. And before we start, I would like to give land acknowledgement. So I would like to acknowledge that Squiz does its work for Canadians from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. This acknowledgement is a reminder of discriminatory, racist, and colonial practices that have had a lasting legacy and continue to create barriers for Indigenous peoples and communities in our city. In the next few days, I encourage you to learn a bit more about the land we live on and personalize your connections to the territories on which we have settled. So, after this land acknowledgement, I would like that if everyone would like, they can introduce themselves in the chat box, like from where they are joining us. It's just good to get to know each other. So you can always type that from where you are joining in and like little bit about yourself if you would like. So okay. And then I would like to introduce our speaker. We have here Ranjit Dhari. She is an assistant professor of teaching at UBC School of Nursing, and she's a recipient of 2019 Excellence in Nursing Education Award. Wow, that's really cool. It's Association of Nurses and Nurse Practitioners of BC, and she's also the winner of Award of Excellence in Nursing Practices in 1995 from College of Registered Nurses of BC. So Ranjit, we welcome you here, and I think the floor is yours. It's over to you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that warm welcome, and I'm excited to be here. And so I will begin with my PowerPoint, but I appreciate being given this opportunity to come and share with you. Um, all right, so welcome to the session. So again, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about stress strategies and the importance of self-care. It's really important for us to be considering, especially right now in the time of COVID, to look at how do we manage to stay well and healthy and continue to be building our immunity given where we are in the world with pandemic going on. The land acknowledgement, thank you for that. And so again, UBC is on the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam and Squamish people. I myself am coming from Richmond, which is the land of the Tsawwassen and Kwantlen people. And so we have Kwantlen College in Richmond. So before I begin to the learning objectives, maybe you folks have something that you would like to take out or get from this session. So maybe you could write in the chat box or be willing to put your mic on and share some what you would like to take away from today's session. Just kind of give me an idea. Great. So strategies to promote well-being is coming up. So great. That's exactly where we are going to focus the presentation. So beginning with first a little about understanding stress and the impact of stress on our lives, on our physical and mental well-being. And then I'm going to move into the stress strategies. And if I are going too fast or you're not understanding or you need more information, by all means, please do stop me and let me know. So we want to begin to look at identifying the positive and negative effects of stress on your body and mind, and then what the damage can happen from that in the long term. I'm also going to talk about beginning to look at creating your own self-care plan. And so I encourage you to really begin to think about that as I move through this presentation. And then really beginning to understand what are some key wellness resources. I have a whole list that at the end that I will have for you to take away. And I also had said to Christine that I would create a Word document with some of the links and for you to then explore further as to what works for you. Each one of us is different. So different things for different people work. And so finding your right fit. So stress. So what is stress? So when you think of the word stress, what comes to your mind? And if you could put in the chat box a word or a couple of words of what comes to your mind. Panic. What else? Yes, the mind chatter. That's my struggle always. Yeah. Feeling overwhelmed. And I think definitely those are great. So we do are living in a time when we have a lot of anxiety and fear going on with COVID, where there's a lot of confusion going on. Sometimes that can lead to being nervous and frozen, as somebody talked about being frozen, and then of course leading to many challenges for us. So here's some definitions of stress. So stress is any change you encounter, and depending upon how you look on it, it can be negative or it can be positive. And then, so if we look upon it as stress being very negative, it can begin to have a wear and tear on the body, especially if you have chronic ongoing stress, it can really impact us. And then if it can lead to our inability to be able to cope with problems, it can lead to having a loss of emotional control. And somebody talked about that it can lead to emotional challenges. And then to that mind chatter that somebody mentioned, yes, so the mind is monkeying all over the place. We lack clarity, we can't think straight. And so the inner peace is missing out in our lives, and we're always struggling to find it. So in some ways, though, stress is part of the normal life. And if we didn't have stress, it would be terrible for us, because in many ways, stress plays a key role in keeping us safe, protecting us. And so we do need to have some stress in our lives. It can also help to motivate us. For my students, having a little bit of stress and anxiety around the exam really gets them motivated to study and strive for the next performance piece. So we do need some stress. But stress is about also the demands on the body that it's placing and on the mind, and it can lead to illnesses. So in the world, we keep hearing about lots of chronic illnesses. And right now, during the time of COVID, we are very concerned about our immunity being strong. Stress can lead to anxiety, fear, which somebody again had mentioned in the chat box. And then if you look around in the world in our headlines in the newspaper, we've been hearing a lot about the mental challenge, the mental illness that we are seeing. And so it can lead to that. But as I mentioned, not all stress is bad. So it's that here, Hans Saley, who was one of the big researchers in this field, talked about that it's not the stress that it kills us, but it's how we react to it. So if we can begin to learn to develop some skills around managing it, then it actually can be controlled and managed. And that's what is really important for us, given that we are in the time of pandemic, but any time anyway, but especially now, we really need to begin to think about ourselves and how we can keep ourselves healthy. So I want you to take a few moments and think about yourself. And so what causes you stress? What are some stressors as women in the STEM world do you face? Maybe you can write a little bit in the chat to what somebody's already said about meeting deadlines. What else? Meeting deadlines. What else do you experience?
So I can see in chat box some people have said like fight, flight, and freeze, fear,
Right.
anger, confused how to navigate, paralysis,
Yeah.
and nervosity,
Yeah.
and too much emotional challenging situations,
Yeah.
juggling, added emotional labor,
Yeah.
extreme change, time pressure, a loss of something, finding the balance between work and family life.
Great. So those are really good things. And I think we're all in the same place, that we are all experiencing those. And again, it's important for us to begin to figure that out. What each one of us will have a different type of pressure, different type of stressor. And it's important for us to then think about that and what would be a good care plan, a self-care plan that would work for it. So here are some basic fears that do cause stress for us in our lives, and especially now with COVID, looking at in terms of the death piece, we're all very frightened. So fear of death is known as to be actually the number one, and being catching diseases. Fear of failure, right? So again, for me and my students in that UBC, there's lots of usually fear around failing the exam or failing the assignment or the course. A lot of us in relationships have that fear of rejection, not being liked for who we are. There's the fear of what's going to come next, what's going to happen to us in the next moment, hour, or tomorrow. And our mind is always trying to take us there, right? And right now, with all the isolation going on, that brings a lot of stress for us in terms of our mental well-being. And then, of course, if we don't know and we don't have control over our lives or how we are able to live our lives, then that can lead to the fear of not having control or self-dominance. I want you to think about what's going on in the world around us. So take a look. What have been some of the headlines? What are some things that are happening that unknowingly might be also causing you a lot of stress? So we definitely know the pandemic, with all the issues going on with it, has been very stressful for many, many people, but also the climate change. We've had the fires going on, we've got the flooding going on, and maybe some people who have chronic illnesses are not able to handle the fires that happened and might have had a lot of stress. I had a friend who has a lung disease, and when the fires were happening in the summer, it was very stressful for her because she had to stay cooped up in her house and could not go out. And yet it was beautiful summertime. All during this year, we've heard about racism, and many of us are women of color, and so maybe we've experienced a lot of racism in our lives. We've got the USA elections going on, and what that's going to mean for us as Canadians, as their neighbors. We had elections here, so again, that might have caused a lot of rift or discussions or different types of emotions. Economy, so if you were self-employed, then that's been a big issue for you this year in terms of managing economic. Gender, we do know that women experience more stress because of our being females, and so there has been that piece for us. Violence, and if we think about some of the headlines we've been seeing, that domestic violence is on the rise during this time of COVID. So really, and we do know that women experience violence across the lifespan more than anybody else, and so that's always there in the back. And then, of course, I could hear a lot about sleep and insomnia. It seems a lot of people these days really experience a lot of sleep disturbances, not being able to sleep, with the mind sort of going chatter. And so this can lead to acute stress, which can be that is short term, but then we're able to get back to homeostasis, or chronic stress. We are never able to come back to that calm and peaceful place. And then it's ongoing stress, which then really creates the wear and tear on our bodies. So some of you mentioned some of these things again, but again, some more pieces, maybe relationships, family, financial obligations. The piece that hasn't been mentioned about is techno stress. I've got a slide on it a little later on that I'll show you. Traumatic stress is big. So maybe the way we were raised or where we were raised or our cultural upbringing, or maybe the traumas we've experienced during our life, that we might be still holding on to some of that baggage and we don't realize the havoc it might be playing in our lives. Emotional problems, heavy workloads. I know for me that's been very big this year with having to move to online, and I'm not a techie. And so it's been very, very hard to learn to teach online and move myself to online learning myself and then teach the students. So again, people like maybe who don't like to do public speakings, that's also known to be as one of the big top ones in terms of the fears. So I mentioned about techno stress. We've been bombarded. I know that I'm bombarded with so much stuff that I can't keep on top of it. And yet I don't do Facebook. I don't do Instagram. I don't do majority of the things. And yet I still feel at times very overwhelmed with what is out there. So again, I would encourage you to think about what are things in your life that might be from technology that are causing you stress and how you can begin to minimize. If you haven't seen this film, I would encourage you to take a look at it. It's called The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix. I found it really eye-opener. I think it's very well done. It won the Sundance Award. And basically what it talks about is how the impact of technology has had on our lives, and especially on our brains and on the hardwiring and what we're beginning to see, right? So we're beginning to see dementia become earlier and earlier, younger and younger. People begin to have the same with chronic diseases. One of the things that stood out for me when I watched this film was about when social media began to increase, the impact it had on girls, young girls. And in the film, they talk about how young girls' rates of cutting, which happens when there's mental challenges going on, began to rise at the same time as more and more social media was happening. So the impact of comparing themselves or looking at other people's lives and beginning to then have take it out on themselves by cutting themselves. I've got this little short YouTube I'm going to show, and hopefully my technology piece will work. As I said, I'm not very good at it, so I usually get lost. Are you able to see that okay?
Yes.
Cramming for a test? Trying to get more done than you have time to do? Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed. But more than just an emotion, stress is a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. In the short term, stress can be advantageous, but when activated too often or too long, your primitive fight or flight stress response not only changes your brain, but also damages many of the other organs and cells throughout your body. Your adrenal gland releases the stress hormones cortisol, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. As these hormones travel through your bloodstream, they easily reach your blood vessels and heart. Adrenaline causes your heart to beat faster and raises your blood pressure, over time causing hypertension. Cortisol can also cause the endothelium, or inner lining of blood vessels, to not function normally. Scientists now know that this is an early step in triggering the process of atherosclerosis, or cholesterol plaque buildup in your arteries. Together, these changes increase your chances of a heart attack or stroke. When your brain senses stress, it activates your autonomic nervous system. Through this network of nerve connections, your big brain communicates stress to your enteric or intestinal nervous system. Besides causing butterflies in your stomach, this brain-gut connection can disturb the natural rhythmic contractions that move food through your gut, leading to irritable bowel syndrome, and can increase your gut sensitivity to acid, making you more likely to feel heartburn. Via the gut's nervous system, stress can also change the composition and function of your gut bacteria, which may affect your digestive and overall health. Speaking of digestion, does chronic stress affect your waistline? Well, yes. Cortisol can increase your appetite. It tells your body to replenish your energy stores with energy-dense foods and carbs, causing you to crave comfort foods. High levels of cortisol can also cause you to put on those extra calories as visceral or deep belly fat. This type of fat doesn't just make it harder to button your pants. It is an organ that actively releases hormones and immune system chemicals called cytokines that can increase your risk of developing chronic diseases, such as heart disease and insulin resistance. Meanwhile, stress hormones affect immune cells in a variety of ways. Initially, they help prepare to fight invaders and heal after injury, but chronic stress can dampen the function of some immune cells, make you more susceptible to infections, and slow the rate you heal. Want to live a long life? You may have to curb your chronic stress. That's because it has even been associated with shortened telomeres, the shoelace tip ends of chromosomes that measure a cell's age. Telomeres cap chromosomes to allow DNA to get copied every time a cell divides without damaging the cell's genetic code. And they shorten with each cell division. When telomeres become too short, a cell can no longer divide, and it dies. As if all that weren't enough, chronic stress has even more ways it can sabotage your health, including acne, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, headaches, muscle tension, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and irritability. So, what does all this mean for you? Your life will always be filled with stressful situations, but what matters to your brain and entire body is how you respond to that stress. If you can view those situations as challenges you can control and master, rather than as threats that are insurmountable, you will perform better in the short run and stay healthy in the long run.
Okay, so as you saw that from the video, stress impacts us in many ways. So one of the things I've talked a little bit about was chronic illnesses. We do know that we're seeing more and more chronic diseases. And so the diabetes, which then is impacted with us collecting a lot of fat around our belly, around the middle and the visceral fat, and therefore leading to a high number of diabetes. We've got the fatty livers issues going on. We've got a younger age in terms of heart disease. And then of course, in terms of their aging process with the telomeres and impacting the DNA. So really important for us to start to then create a really good plans in managing our stress. So just a quick stress response, what happens? The stimulus is sent to the brain and the brain deciphers this as a threat. So this is from our ancient times, from primitive age, when we had to then either fight or flight. So for stay to fight the maybe dinosaurs or flee to keep ourselves safe. So it was a survival thing. And so we still have it that way, that we respond by that, and the body stays activated until the threat is over. And then the body returns to a homeostasis once it figures the threat has gone. But if the body continues to experience threat all the time, then yes, we never are able to get to a homeostasis, and the wear and tear and the chronic stress continues. So let's have you again think about, how does stress impact you? So where do you experience stress in your body? I want you to just sort of go into your body, just close your eyes for a minute, a couple of seconds there, and try and think about when you're stressed, what happens? Do you start to sweat? Do you start to have breathing problems? Do you start to have ongoing headaches, or does your tummy get butterflies? So again, about what happens in terms of when we are experiencing stress, depending upon how we react, then it can lead to being unable to focus, lead to concentration problems. It can lead to then some of that dissatisfaction with our job, with our relationships, with the people that are around us. The negative emotion, we are seeing lots of depression. So our depression rates have been high. The substance use, we have an opioid crisis going on. Those have been our other big headline. And in fact, yesterday I just had a talk with someone where then the number of deaths due to opiates or substance use is way higher than what we've had deaths due to COVID at this time. And it's really risen since the pandemic was declared. So also then, as I mentioned about sleep, I hear this a lot. So it's definitely would encourage you, if you are one of those sleep challenged people, to really look at it. And of course, then it can lead to burnout and not being able to work or having to go off on a disability. So think about some of the things that I had asked you to look at. So is it headaches for you? So think about these three areas: body, mood, behavior. Is it tension? Is it headaches? Is it restlessness? Is it irritability or anger? Or is it beginning to eat a lot? We keep hearing about, again, people who've been in very much isolation, overeating because the fridge is so close by, and gaining a lot of weight, or beginning to socially withdraw from people. So I did mention earlier on that some stress is good. So this is the Yerkes-Dodson performance stress curve. It's a theory that some stress is very important in our lives. And so having some stress actually is positive. So here, where we have at the beginning, no stress happening, we can be fatigued, we can be bored, or we can be just kind of not interested in anything. We have some stress that comes in. It'll push us to start to perform, take notice, try and achieve a goal. It'll encourage us to move, become activated, begin to actually also build some creativity in us. But if we go to the excessive place where it's too much stress and we can't handle it, this is where we have burnout, we have depression, we begin to have withdrawal, and we begin to be exhausted all the time. So this is, again, important to think about. A lot of performers, athletes actually go by this theory and look at it and try and have enough stress to sort of encourage them to continue performing, continue to strive for the goals, the gold medal. This next slide again talks about how it can impact our productivity. So a little bit of stress, you're not very productive. You have some stress that's positive, you see it, and it begins to become more productive. But if you have too much stress right at the end here, you begin to feel that you're not in control, you can't handle it, and you also then again become, the productivity goes low. And so again, those have been some discussions by employers around this time of pandemic, that are they seeing employees be as productive as they used to be. So let's move on to the self-care piece. So what are some ways to manage your stress? And in fact, then here again, I want you to put in the chat box, what are some things that you yourself have maybe began to do? What are some strategies you're using? So if you could share in the chat box, what are some things you've got? And in the meantime, while you're thinking that, so again, some stress management areas you want to think about. As I said, you want to learn about stress, but you also want to learn about yourself. So it's really important beginning to be going inside and thinking. And then whatever your coping techniques right now, are they working for you? Begin to learn and practice a variety of coping. So don't stay with just one thing. And then beginning to really take charge of the stress in your lives. And so beginning to really look at what does the research say, what's some evidence-based strategies that might be helpful for you. Are you able to share some things from the chat for me? Because I can't see it right now.
Yeah, some people said like, okay, going for bike rides, connecting with friends, going on a hike, watching Bollywood movies, exercise, and deep breathing, listening to the calm music, reading books, walking my dog, playing Sudoku, and watching Netflix, sports, and music. So most of the people, I think they have said about like watching movies or listening music and doing some sport and connecting with friends. I think these are the three main.
Great, thank you. Those are
Um,
great strategies. We do know the rates to buy a dog have really gone high, and so has the price to buy a dog. Anywhere from 5 to 10,000, I think, is the going price to get a puppy. And so everybody seems to be buying a dog, and there's a shortage. So there's a wait list to get a dog or a cat animal or a cat. But definitely the dogs seem to be very popular these days. And somebody wrote about Bollywood movies. I'm with you. I don't know how many times I've watched Kabhi Khush Kabhi Gum. That's one of my go-to when I'm stressed. I always go and watch that. And so my kids go, oh no, not again, Mom. But I love Kabhi Khush Kabhi Gum. I'm an addict of that when I'm stressed and burnt out. So definitely finding things that work for you. So here we have, again, 4 areas that I want you to start considering for yourself: your emotional well-being, the mental, physical, and the spiritual. So again, it's important that, spiritually that might play a different role for you, but you begin to then look at what you can begin to bring into your care plan. Important for us to be looking at ourselves in emotionally, right? Sometimes we, as I said before, we have lots of traumas maybe, and we're carrying still some of that forward, some of the angers maybe. And it's really important that we begin to do what's called emotional literacy. So taking a look at us in terms of the different emotions we are and who we are. So this is a lovely quote from Nelson Mandela that I usually like to share. As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead into my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison, right? So prison in his mind. So it was important for him to leave that baggage behind in order to be able to then come out and do the work he did. He couldn't have done that without having done some cleansing in terms of leaving the anger and baggage behind. So really important for us too as women, because I think sometimes we have a lot that we carry inside us and just bottle it down, but important for us to look at that. As I mentioned earlier on, the positive impact of stress, a lot of research being done in this field. And one of the people that I like to read a lot and follow is Kelly McCognell. She has a really good TED Talk. It's called about how to make stress your friend. And she's funny, but she's great. And so her research showing that it's important about how we begin to have a perception of stress being positive, that it can be positive, and therefore change the way we react to it. So I myself, when I've got a challenge going on or a stressful thing going on in my lives, will a lot of times tell myself, oh, this is going to make me become more stronger, emotionally, strengthen my emotional muscle. It's teaching me new skills. I'm learning things that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. And so I try and deal with my stresses that way, really try and look at it in a positive way. Self-care, so these are 5 areas that we want you to begin to look at. And at UBC right now, we have what's called the 5 Thrive, and this is what 5 Thrive is, that we teach our students all campus. The 5 Thrive usually goes on during this month, and it's about beginning to look at nutrition. So we know the importance of eating healthy foods, but we also know that right now we're going into the months of darkness. And so there's been a lot of research coming up around vitamin D and the importance, especially because where we live in the part of the world, about taking more vitamin D and keeping our levels up. Sleep hygiene, important to be doing sleep hygiene. So I would encourage you again to begin to look at strategies that can help you. So whether it's keeping the technology out of your room, shutting the technology down earlier than before, maybe you're also beginning to have maybe you like to have a bath and with some Epsom salts. So looking for strategies that will help you sleep. Community, so that's really big. It's really important for our mental well-being to have a community around us, to be connected. The richer your community is, the research shows the more stronger you will be mentally. So that it becomes your social sort of supportive network, to safety network. And so important to begin to look at how can you build your social connections, how can you begin to make it more rich. Exercise, yes, we might not be able to go. We're coming into the dark months and the rainy months. I hate going out when it's dark and rainy. And so maybe begin to look at strategies that you could do where you are at home, maybe some walking or stretching or yoga. And the other piece here is about giving. So research has shown that people who give, are kind, or do some volunteer work are much more healthier also in terms of their stress management mentally. So maybe there's a neighbor that needs a help, or maybe you can volunteer somewhere, maybe joining a club that does some good deeds. So you're getting your social kindness pieces or well-being, but also then building a community. So look for ways to then build that, all of that. Some other ideas, breath work. So when the students start in September with me, I started right away teaching them about breath work. The ones that I teach them is what's called diaphragmatic breathing. I have it a little later on. And again, I've heard from the students that they have found it really helpful, that at times of stress, especially when they're writing exams, that it really helps them out. I had one student that shared a story about how he went into an exam, final exam worth a lot of marks, and he froze and couldn't think, and then started to panic and began to have the sweatiness and anxiety. And then he just remembered about the breath work and that we had been practicing in class, and moved to the breath work and was able to finish the exam and pass the course and did well. So just very simple thing, but it can be really effective. We know humor therapy is great. So I love, for that reason, I think Kabhi Khush Kabhi Gham, because it's got the humor in it. And so laughter is really good. Louise Hay talks about, how she used laughter as a way to heal herself. So really look into things that can help to bring you some joy and decrease your stress. If you are one of those who loves art or doodling, even doodling is great, journaling, writing things down. Cognitive reframing, so reframing those things that are coming as challenges and reframing them to think of different ways. I'm going to go a little bit into meditation a bit later on. And then again, in terms of relaxation techniques, the autogenic training, and then massage, if you've got extended benefits, then really good to begin to use some of those to help you get through this time. So again, some health promotion strategies, good to begin to really get time management skills and routines. So I'm going to be telling you about Dr. Laura Santos. She's got a podcast that she talks about, really important in times of stressful times in our lives, to really stick to our routine, develop a routine and stick to it, because it'll help to decrease the stress. A sense of belonging and community. So as I told you, I've been teaching online, but how then to create a sense of belonging to my class that I teach and build a community. So I've really been working hard in terms of small group work to begin to create a sense of belonging, getting them connected, and they began to now really begin to know each other. So really important for you to begin to look at that. Somebody had talked about listening to music, great. And so it's great in terms of our mental and our wiring of the brain. I talked a bit about journaling, and if you are a big follower of Oprah Winfrey, then you'll know that she talks a lot about her gratitude journals and that she keeps them all the time. And then I've got one here about being in nature. So this is a great, I put a link here. It's a great, it talks about forest bathing. So going into nature and sort of being surrounded by trees. It's apparently a Japanese technique that where you go and then you just spend some time. And I believe you folks have been going out on trail rides or trail walks in the forest, right? I think you went to Pacific Park somewhere, some SCWIST activities. Yeah. Okay. So here I have a slide on diaphragmatic breathing. So it's really about just being wherever you are, standing or sitting, being comfortable, taking a deep breath in. So some of you have maybe are already doing this in terms of yoga, your other techniques, and then just taking a big breath in and beginning to then breathe out. But as you're breathing it out, you're concentrating, you're visualizing, and you're blowing out a big clouds. I have here a link to a YouTube, so I would encourage you to go on YouTube and look at it. There's several different ones that show you how to do diaphragmatic breath work. These are links to different types of meditation. So again, as I said, I will be leaving some of this stuff with Christine, and so she can share with you. And I would encourage you to go and take a look at these links. In these two YouTubes, they're very short. They're only about 3 minutes. They talk about 6 different types of meditations. And so sometimes I know people say to me, oh, I've tried that meditation. I tried meditation, but it doesn't work for me. I can't do it. I'm not good at meditation. It's about finding the right meditation that works for you. So really important to look at who you are and what do you like. I know for me, what works is a visualization where there's a lot of sort of thinking of pictures. And I also like to do movement. So going out for a walk in nature in solitude. So find what works for you and try it out, because the research has continued to show and demonstrate that meditation is very good for our brain, neuroplasticity, in terms of helping to heal and manage our stress. I got a couple of quotes here from you around the meditation. So the mind craves homeostasis just like our body does. So coming to that place of calmness and stillness. So the body craves it, but so does the mind. Given the cacophony of sensory bombardment found in nearly all corners of the global village, taking time to quiet the mind is no longer a luxury, but a necessity to maintain a sense of mental equilibrium. Meditation necessitates a designated time period, so it's really important to begin to build it into your schedule and look at how then you can make it that it continues to be on a daily basis. So for me, what I found best works is if I do it first thing in the morning before I wake up. And so for many years now, I've done a 30-minute visualization meditation that I have on my phone. And I just first start with that before beginning my day. I find it's been very effective. It helps me staying calm and grounded and manage the different challenges I have. So again, I would encourage you to take a look and find what works for you. So meditation has begun to move a lot into healthcare. It's been around for a while in healthcare, but it's continued to expand. My sort of first connection with it was back, I think, in 2000, coming across John Kabat-Zinn work, who had created a book called Full Catastrophe Living, and it was about chronic pain. So he began to research and use meditation with folks who were having chronic pain, were really debilitated by it, and began to then bring them into groups and begin to teach them how to do a body scan and find where their pain was, and then go and meditate into that pain and try and soften it up and loosen it up. So it's been a very successful, it continues to be now that in a lot of chronic pain groups, meditation is used as one way to manage that. Then in anxiety, depression, mental health world, we began to have more and more mindfulness meditation coming in. I have a colleague who was working here in Vancouver with the mental health team, and they have begun to run mindfulness groups for people who experience depression and anxiety. It was an 8-week program where they taught them how to use meditation, mindfulness to manage that and kind of work their way out of it. For us at UBC, as I mentioned, the Thrive is on right now. And out in the community, you might have heard about Beyond the Blues. That's a mental health program. It usually rolls out during this month. So I would encourage you to take a look at it. If you just do an internet search on the Beyond the Blues, you'll find there's lots of resources and lots of initiatives going on. I work in public health. And then over the years, we began to do things like mindfulness parenting, mindfulness eating, especially around the Shakedown, which is a program from Children's Hospital around eating disorders, that we use a lot of that in terms of working with the adolescent population around mindfulness eating and managing eating disorders. Some resources for you to look at and find. So 811 is a great number for no matter what. It used to be called the BC Nurse Helpline. It's a BC government free phone line, and now it's expanded. It's now called 811. It's open, it's available to you 7 days a week, 24 hours, available for anybody. So you got anything going on, you can phone, and then they will help you figure out, should you go to hospital? Should you try and just go to your doctor? Or here's an idea you could try and see if you can manage your health emergency. They also now have a pharmacist, they have nutritionists, and I think they've added a couple of other people now, especially during the COVID. So it's a great number to know. And then if you go on their site, they also have lots of resources and fact sheets on health. So again, I've mentioned a couple of times about Mental Health Association, the Canadian Mental Health Association. Here to Help is a great site to look at for resources. There's lots of modules. If you've got young children or adolescent population that is maybe struggling, then the Kelty Mental Health Center is based at BC Children's Hospital. And if you go on their site, they've got lots of resources around meditations even, but even just generally around health and mental health. The BC Crisis Line, I would encourage you, if you are sometimes ever in a place where you don't want to talk to, so then you've got nobody to talk to, then phone the crisis line. In my early nursing career, I actually did 2 years of volunteer work with the crisis line, and it was amazing the phone calls we used to get. And we man those lines usually 24 hours, 7 days a week. So do look for resources in your community around that. And if you want more help, then looking at maybe talking to your doctor and getting a referral to the appropriate person. And of course, then family and friends are always a great resource to talk to. I put some links here for some resources that are available, that are free for you, and I would encourage you again to explore that. Bounce Back program is from the Canadian Mental Health. So if you again just Google or do internet search of Bounce Back, it's supposed to be a program that you do yourself around mental well-being. Currently, right now, Oprah and Deepak have 21 days of meditation experience going on. Each one has a theme, so there's usually an intention or a purpose. I think we're on day 5 right now, so I would encourage you to take a look at it, and it's free. Dr. Laurie Santos, who's based at Yale University, a big researcher around happiness and stress, has a course called The Science of Wellbeing. Coursera is a program where they offer a lot of free courses and paid courses from across the world. And so it's being offered through Coursera, and it's free right now, and it's usually is free. And so it's called The Science of Wellbeing. And I had my kids who are in their 20s take it online when the pandemic began to happen, and they found it really helpful. So I would encourage you to begin to look at that. The 10% Happier Meditation is always offering. Calm has tools that can help you sort of ground and center. Headspace is again around mindful things. And Mindshift CBT is mind shift in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy. So again, lots of tools and resources there. I think we're going fast for time, so I'm going to be speeding it up so that we can have some bit of time maybe for questions. And then in terms of mental health, this one's a good one that I keep in my a little card, so I would encourage you to make it. So it looks like this. It's a little card that you can keep in your wallet. And on it says that when you're having anxiety or a panic attack, when I think somebody had mentioned about panic, that you begin to ground yourself by looking at 5 things, trying to touch 4 things so that you're grounding yourself rather than coming out of anxiety. Begin to listen for 3 things, begin to try and smell 2 things, and taste something, so that you're shifting your brain away from the panic that you might be in and not being able to think. So again, you can even get them from the mental health folks, but it's like a little just card that you can keep in your wallet as a reminder. So sometimes I get asked a lot by the students about money and happiness. So I've got a couple of things here around joy and happiness. So money doesn't buy happiness. So in terms of what has been though, is that we know when we're poor or have low income, it creates a lot of stress. And so really important to have economically being strong. but not to strive for that being a multimillionaire, because it doesn't really bring you happiness. If that's your goal, then it doesn't always bring the happiness. Some research has come out are showing that maybe around 75,000 or 100,000 is a good figure in terms of being able to lead a comfortable life, depending upon where you live. And so we have Dr. Dunn, who is a big researcher at UBC around the money and the happiness joy. Many of the universities have what's called happiness labs, and they do research on this topic. So I would encourage you, again, if you're interested in this topic, to do that looking. So we do know that when we have more joy, we're calm, the stress is away, we become more creative, we become more innovative. So again, really important to then bring your stress and hone it and bring it down. For fulfilling relationships and friendships has been the key cornerstone of bringing joy and happiness to your life. There's been a Stanford study that's been done for many years, followed from young boys all the way now into their 60s. I would encourage you to take a look. There's a really good TED Talk. And again, it's found that it's been about relationships that has brought happiness. Sometimes people ask me about geography. So, being away from the cold weather, if you're living in the Bahamas, and again, research has shown that it isn't. It's about, again, nice, thick, strong relationships around us, rich relationships that will bring you joy and bring you happiness. And so that concludes my presentation, I think. So again, important to come down to self-care, begin to take some of this away, begin to explore it further, and think about how you can begin to incorporate it into your lives. All right, I put some references here. The book that we're usually using in my class that I'm teaching, because I do teach the stress course, is called Seaward, Managing Stress, Principles and Strategies for Health and Well-Being. And it's a great textbook around stress management. And there we go. So any questions? And if you, my email address is there, you're welcome to contact me if you have any questions, or if you missed out on the resources or you're looking for some resource around this topic, feel free to contact me by all means.
Okay, thanks, Ranjit. Thanks for this wonderful presentation. I also learned a lot. I mean, being a researcher in the lab, and I had to work sometimes 16 or 12, 13 hours continuously every day. And when you had to even meet some deadlines for grants, for getting data and everything, it's so stressful that you even forget to eat properly. You forget to take lunch, you forget to take dinner, and then it will cause you headache, it will cause you low blood pressure and many other things. So it's a very, very good presentation, and I think you share so many resources that can be helpful for everyone who is attending here. And so now I would like to invite everyone who has questions. If you would like to ask Ranjit, you can type in chat box and definitely we can go from it. So first question is that if you can share the presentation deck which you shared, because there were lots of resources and links that you have in your presentation.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, so I can share it with Christine. And I had also told Christine I couldn't give her the, make a document with all these links and resources, and that probably be the most helpful in terms of looking at the links and YouTubes. I'll put it into a Word document, you can have it. But yeah, that's fine. In the PowerPoint, it's fine.
Okay, cool. I have actually one question. When you were listing some therapies, some strategies and tools, there was one point about autogenic something. Yeah, autogenic.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never heard about it. I don't know what is this.
Well, autogenic is where you tighten your muscles and you relax and release. So it is a way of beginning to sort of those tension headaches people have. Then you're beginning to then sort of pull that muscle and relax. Sometimes they even also, there are devices that can help with in terms of, stimulate the vibration. And so they're trying to sort of release some of the tension in your muscles. The other one that I didn't have that I sometimes have there is called biofeedback. And that's another one that there's began to be a lot of electrical devices that people sometimes use as a way to sort of give feedback to themselves to manage their stress. And so I think a couple of the hospitals also have some labs around biofeedback. So it's more around the muscle relaxation kind of techniques, both of them, biofeedback and autogenic. But I know my friend Jill is here, and she's probably a better expert on that than I am. Jill, do you have any
Well,
Any,
with that is that's the whole philosophy and the science around tightening your muscle and relaxing, and it also your brain then starts to focus on that tightening and relaxing, and so that you break the tension cycle that you've created in your mind and your body. So some people start doing that from the top of their head down to their feet, or some people, start at their feet and work up and tightening, relaxing. And so it's just the science of registering in your brain what your body's doing. So the biofeedback loops are well recognized in the whole science of stress and management and health as well, right?
and used a lot in mental health. So Jill's background is mental health also, so it's used a lot.
It really does. And you can do that also in just verbal conversations as well, helping someone just to retrain what they're saying in their brains to themselves. That self-talk is also a part of that as well. Remembering our words mean a lot to our bodies. So using the words calm, relax, I feel peaceful with your breathing, and really just helps remind you to relax. A lot of times with anxiety, as Ranjit said, the exercise is that when you can pat like your shoulder one side and then the other side, and that just breaks sometimes the anxiety. Or even when you're in the car, if you're stopped at a stoplight and you feel really anxious, try tapping, keeping one hand on the wheel, but tapping one knee, then tapping the other knee breaks that tense anxiety feeling.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks a lot. Yeah, you really described it in detail, and really it was very helpful. Thank you. And now we have room for just only one more question. And the question is, how to distinguish between emotional and mental wellness. I think that's very important, because sometimes when you're going through the emotional trauma and emotional phase, and then of course your mental health is disturbed, but that's completely different than what is really associated with mental wellness. So if you can just, I think that now, because we have very limited time, so I think I would definitely like to ask this question. Someone posted in chat box. Yeah.
Yes. So the emotional is more around the anger we have or the anxiety we experience, right? So those are the emotional things that may be from our lives or traumas, as I mentioned earlier on. And then the mental well-being in terms of the mental is our cognitive, right? In terms of thinking, so how that gets impacted by whether the emotions or the physiology reactions that can happen. So when we do have stresses, that there's a neurotransmitter reaction, there's a chemical reaction, there's a hormonal. And so those also impact then in terms of the way our homeostasis is in our body, in terms of all of that. And so then it can impact in terms of the mental well-being, which can lead, from the emotions even to then the depression or the schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. So those are some of the mental health challenges. But in terms of emotions, when we have a fear, sometimes people have fear of certain things like a spider, and then that can cause the stress reaction too.
Okay. Thanks, Ranjit. Thanks a lot. And thanks for being here and sharing this wonderful presentation. It was very helpful. I really wish I could share it with more students before, because I think many students actually experience it, especially during this pandemic when everyone had to stay at home, and when students who are more used to work in the lab and in classes, they have so many hours free and they don't know what to do, and then they don't know how to deal with it. So, okay, I would like to say thanks to everyone who joined us today for this event. And oh yeah, I have to announce for the next event.
Well, thank you. I'll just say thank you to everyone for coming, and thank you for having me. I appreciated that, and it was great to be here and connected with all of you. So thank you.
Okay, so we are going to have our next event for in brown bags. It is on November 12th. It's about cobalt exploration and archaeological approach. So if you would, anyone who would like to join and who is interested in this topic, everyone is welcome. Even you can invite your friends and other people or colleagues for this talk. And we will be posting this link, I think, on SCWIST website for registration.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So it will be available on our website. Thank you and take care, everyone. Have a good evening. It's a good weather outside, not sunny, not rainy, not chilly. So just go out and enjoy the day. Thank you. Bye.